I'm actually just curious about one of the things you just mentioned, Eddie, and that idea being, this question of multiple concepts. What's more important to you guys, especially in the different domains that you're in, getting multiple ideas, getting as many as possible out there, or coming to that kind of one big idea as quickly as possible?
I mean, you always want to get to that big idea as quick as possible due to the fact that you've actually got an issue with time, and more so money, So, but the factor is that if you have a underlying framework to your process or philosophy to it, you fundamentally shouldn't go wrong. If you had multiple concepts, you could actually sort of pick up that concept and actually find out what the limitations are, take those limitations out, and move it into that area of being that is the key concept. I know, it sounds like an age-old thing, but it actually does work. The whole factor of sometimes you have projects where you can actually have those stakeholders being there, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you've got like some wanker, that is just totally destroys the whole process. You've got those stakeholders, they're loving it, you're going through all the ideations and everything, and then some wanker comes along and says, no. You also have the idea that somebody comes into that process and then let's say that they've just been employed right at the end, right. And they're like, I wasn't invited, I didn't know. And then it just goes, it just melts. And so the whole aspect of that is, you've got that, and then you've also got the process of a client that just says, all these ideas, I don't know if they're going to work, I just don't know. And so you just pick one, and you will make it work. You're a designer, you will make it work, and it will actually work for the public as well.
And I hear you say that. When I was listening to you, Elvira, I was feeling like this idea of it was so important to you to get stakeholders in the room and kind of make sure that they were involved early in the process. And I contrast that a little bit to Ethan's kind of like, we have no idea. Let's just get something out there and kind of see how it goes. But from your perspective, isn't that difficult? Isn't it difficult to try to get all of the kind of like key higher ups in there as early as possible? It's easier said than done, it sounds to me, right? Like,
to get all the stakeholders engaged?
Yeah.
Oh,
sometimes you're working without that. Even when you want that really badly, it becomes an obstacle sometimes, I would imagine.
I tried to explain that also in the presentation, like sometimes, like with that client in China, there's no way you get them in a room,
right.
Or get them even into a collaboration mindset. There are other, especially educational institutions, really love it. So it kind of depends on the client.
Right.
And I think we are kind of in a slightly different business, like the way what products, like you bring your own products to the market, you're your own kind of like boss in that sense, while we are client serving in that sense, and they will not bring something to the market that they're not happy with. So it's a little bit of a different thing. And it really depends on the project, how much you need to engage them. As I said, like how complex is the project, how much do you need to understand. So it's really, for us, it's about, okay, how much understanding do we need to deliver a really good project? And maybe to my all-time worst career moment was when we worked for an American university, and
you can name it.
No. Because I know what's coming. We asked to get access to the president, and away, super busy, and we worked with his senior team, and we worked with the architects, and they were like, yeah, we really know him. I mean, yes, he's kind of like a tricky figure, but yeah, we know him. They were super happy with what we did. Like, we went through like presented like everything to them. They loved everything, and then we come into the room with the president. He had basically no clue who we were and why we're even there, and he tore us apart, including his people.
Yeah.
And that is just terrible. And you're like, it's not even the moment of being there and like, where are my murals? And you're like, what? That's the brief? I thought we were talking about something completely different here. But it's also just a waste of time. It's a waste of our time. It's a waste of everyone's time. So,
and I wonder.
And that's the risk in our business. But you're different. You're your own decision maker in that sense. So.
But I wonder. In a sense, you have stakeholders. You have these users. You have all these subscribers. You have people on your site. You have members. These are people that ultimately are the key decision makers here. The approach just seems to be somewhat different. Get something out, and it's almost like the presentation ideation process that they go to, but internally.
Yeah, for sure it's different when you're direct to consumer. I think that like the process probably the same. It's just you're not going through an agent to go through basically the final target. So I think that it does change the process a lot. I think we've always built it as part of our company in a sense of our philosophy, which is no wholesaling, no distributors. Let's never put a layer between us and the customer. And I think it was part of that philosophy that makes it that it's not just the way we act, it's the kind of company or the kind of products we create that allows to have this kind of process. So I do agree it's not applicable for every kind of situation.
But you still have to have this kind of démarche of figuring out what is a good idea, right? You can decide, let's do everything, but that's probably impractical. You need to decide, okay, someone needs to evaluate it. So what is that process like when you're willing to move fast and break things?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think like it was said before, there's always a limitation of budget and time, or people's time, or just wasting people's energy on something that will not lead to it. I would say that how we go about it is, I definitely think that you're always looking for the big idea. But the way we go about it is that we choose very rapidly the way we move forward, but we always keep the ideas available in case we need to reuse them. So that's the way we balance it. So let's say you have a bunch of ideas from a group of people. We don't all agree, but we know that we have to do something by a certain point in time.
Right.
And then we just choose a direction, but with the knowledge that there's also other ways to go about it.
And the big idea, I guess, comes from all of that testing. You kind of like hone in on whatever that one big thing is.
I think the difference, as an example for us, we launched iPhone, Android, and different applications, but not at the same time. So you create this sort of legacy issue that every company has, which is it's not beautifully integrated because there's different products at different times. So at some point, you do want to have an overarching idea of where you want to go and start pulling things together. So there's one unique idea or direction as to what kind of service you want to create. Mm-hmm. So that's something that is difficult to do, but you always have to keep in mind.
I feel like as designers or as agencies, we're always pitching to our clients that there's this idea of the aha moment or like the eureka. In other words, all of this research and all of the testing and whatever it is that we're doing to kind of get to the answer, we arrive at this place and aha. Does that exist? Is there such a thing as this idea of that eureka moment in what you're doing? Or is it just this very long process that eventually kind of leads into a shallow slope?
I'll start with this. We were always told that as designers, we're here to come up with a solution. Right, the bloody solution. But the fact is, my sister's a biochemist, and what she does is eureka, and she can actually come up with the answer, break it all the way down, find out the reasons why everything actually worked, down to the minutest thing, and that is a eureka particular moment. When we do it, it's sometimes I feel it's luck. It's luck. Sometimes you're so surprised that it's being just embraced so much more than what you actually thought or anticipated that. That may be seen as a eureka moment. You've even got the likes of at Facebook. They were lucky that was a time where they came up with a neutral facing system. It was nice and clean. It wasn't cluttered. But they also said that they were incredibly lucky at that moment in time. So it's a little bit of alchemy there as well.
Elvira, do you agree? Does luck play that much of a role in kind of arriving at that big idea?
Yes, and. I would say I would define eureka moment, probably. I think many of us understand this as something that emerges out of a vacuum. Like this kind of, I'm in the bathtub and nothing happened before, and then I have this great idea. And that's bullshit. Like, innovation does not happen in a vacuum. And even if it seems like completely new idea, never thought about, it is based on so many things that happened before that informed that. And it's the same, I think, if I look at the designers, for example, what I'm really interested, or when I get especially interested when I see that they have a super broad field of reference, they have a super broad field of interest where they like pick and grab from. And it's not always like, oh, there was a product, we just made it better or whatever, but it comes from everywhere, but it doesn't happen in vacuum. And so we might sometimes think it's luck, but at the end of the day, I don't really 100% believe so. I think it's an ingredient, but there's so many other ingredients that actually enable you to be lucky. Because if you wouldn't be as smart as you are, then you wouldn't be lucky.
Yeah. So talking about those ingredients, what's really interesting, I think, about our panel now is that you guys all have these wonderfully varied backgrounds in the stuff that you've studied or in the places you've lived and the other businesses that you've been in. And I kind of wonder, are those ingredients important? This exposure to all these other things, experiences beyond the business that you're actually in right now? Ethan, why don't you take it there? You, by the way, I didn't mention it in the bio, but you have quite a background in dance and performance and a bunch of other things as well.
We want to see that.
Yeah.
That's for a late night show.
Meet him at the bar after.
I was a choir boy, but that's about it.
I think so. I think experiences does influence a lot the way you design, you think about products. I think that encouraging people to not just think of classroom, but outside of that, is a big part of it. Especially now, I feel that this sort of globalization of design, of awareness, is very important. Understanding the way other people live is very important to any design that you create. So I think that is very important. I think the idea of being multidisciplinary is the fact that you've embraced different things. But I don't think that it's a challenge nowadays for this generation, because they're born like that. They come and I'm not just defined by this, I'm this, but I can also do that, I'm also interested in this. And I think that's why it's so interesting. I think that's why a lot of stuff is really interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm curious kind of about methodology. The domains are very different, but we tend to think of things like brainstorming as an example, as kind of a generic term for generating ideas. Are there any things that you guys look at as kind of trusted and true? The workshops that you talked about, I think, were really insightful and interesting. Are there things that you guys say, this is how we're going to generate ideas, or this is how we're going to work with a group of people, or does it always change?
It actually depends. I mean, I just designed visual identity for Codecademy and also dealt with their UI work. And Zach and Ryan, when I met them, first off, I sort of principally said, we're going to play. What we need you to do is come in with all the things that you love and like, from your house. You can put it in a bag and put it on the table, and then we're going to talk about it. And it was really just a way to observe them in regards to what they actually like. Not
workshop tool.
Yeah, it's a workshop tool. And what basically occurred is that Zach loves detail and incredible amount of detail, and the way he also writes certain things. And so you start to find out so many things personal about them, and that was a very sort of important sort of decision. And then you sort of apply that to the rest of your sort of process, and so they would So just to answer your question, there was a variety of ways to deal with different clients and also different projects.
So it depends
There's no
on context,
one system.
And Elvira, I guess after going through all those workshops and obviously the intense amount of actual work that you're doing together with your client, what does it look like after that when you kind of regroup internally and be like, okay, now we need to come up with something to actually pitch back to them? Is that a brainstorm? Is that each in your own bubble? How does that work?
No, I mean, we're our team is between, let's say, 8 to 15, max 15 people with different backgrounds and like from architects to graphic designers. But what happens, I think after, well, usually you got so much information and context, and inspiration can really come from everywhere, right? It can come from something you read. But what happens when you have time to really dive into, you will get inspirations from many kind of like moments. It might be a conversation. It like you just, there's so much that you know that usually it's kind of like an inspiration itself. If we get stuck at some point, there's still, of course, there are like a million methods, and I don't know, you completely like stop and say like, okay, just like put up things that inspire you to that topic. I don't care what it is, if it's a photo or this or that, or let's break out of this kind of, I don't know how to move anymore because I think I tried it all. But then you just kind of have to like go through that. And then we do internal critiques. We do something what I did a lot with my students in Germany is I call it ping pong. So where it's actually not just like, oh, I look at your design and I think like, can you do this? But you actually let them exchange their documents, which is interesting, especially with the young designers, because as a young designer, you'd be usually kind of like pretty attached to your idea. But to give that up to the other ones, who like, yes, I trust you, or like, well, you don't even have to trust them. Just like, come on, let's do something and play, but really not just by critiquing, but actually working at it. I think like that's something I did a lot with my, when I was still designing and not just telling other people how to design. That's something I did a lot, and where sometimes I think the best outcome came through. And that's something I do a lot when people get stuck. I still do a lot when people get stuck. I'm just like, okay, exchange, but really not just like tell the other people.
I call it Royal Rumble. Just like chuck them in.
Nice. And Ethan, your name for that is? So one of the things that kind of sucks is you guys are such interesting people and we have like, zero time. But the bar will be open for a few minutes after this. I wonder before we go though, if anyone has a kind of burning question, you can just put up your hand and I'll repeat it to these guys so we have it on recording. Yes, all of the questions have been answered. Amazing. Well, on that note, I'm going to thank everyone for coming. Thank you very much, Eddie. Thank you very much, Elvira. Thank you very much, Ethan. Thank you. And thanks very much to Max and Andre, who gave birth to this idea. Stay tuned to our Facebook page. You'll hear about our December event coming up. And in the meantime, if you haven't redeemed your drink ticket, please do. Thanks very much.
Thank you.